The two combatants would get in position. Motoyasu, he would point his spear towards Naofumi with a glare in his eyes. Naofumi, on the other hand, would just look at Motoyasu with some pity in his eyes, knowing how this fight was going to go. Motoyasu, he would initially try to lunge forward and, well, try to stab Naofumi, but he would be forced to instead avoid being hit by a tree trunk. Motoyasu would be forced to avoid an onslaught of attacks from Naofumi from there on outwards. Most of these attacks would include the likes of Naofumi throwing an array of things such as fruits with well, strange appearances, seeds, and cactus needles. All of these things Motoyasu would easily avoid, though. This would cause the boy to become a bit cocky, to say the very least. He believed that Naofumi was trying to keep a distance for some reason, and that meant that he was vulnerable getting up close. If that was the case, well, Motoyasu would make sure to attempt to actually get close up to Naofumi and strike from there. Although he would actually be successful in, well, getting close, he would fail to land a strike on a former college student. Naofumi would instead wrap his vines around Motoyasu and actually begin to drain his energy in the form of juices. Motoyasu would look akin to, well, a raisin, yeah, when Naofumi was done with him. This would honestly be a horrifying sight for Mine, who would end up trying to intervene. She would throw a wind attack at Naofumi, but he would be shown to be unaffected. He would reveal that he had his feet firmly planted to the ground. Literally. He would use his other arm in order to actually grab Mine and offer her a taste of Motoyasu's essence. Some tree sap would actually be given to Mine, who would be forced to drink it after interfering with the fight, and she would find it to be rather bitter. Yeah, the villagers would honestly laugh at her expense though, and she would storm off with a malnourished Motoyasu, and they would plan to head back to the capital. While that happened, the villagers would actually cheer for Naofumi's victory. After helping to repair the village some bit, Naofumi would use his new lordship in order to actually build a school for, well, learning about biology, botany or whatever, and a plethora of other things that could be useful for their everyday lives. It was originally made for the younger generation, but the adults, they would actually express their own desire in learning about this as well. This would lead to a separate learning center being developed for the adults on top of that. Now for me, he would have his party members help him in teaching the people the basics, switching out with each other every so often as forms of shifts, to say the very least. They would use their free time to explore and fight monsters too, so they were still leveling up. And after a certain amount of time passed, Naofumi figured that the people, well, they could survive on their own with the knowledge that he bestowed upon them. He would pack up and head out to travel once more, and with the amount of money that Naofumi managed to make, he figured it'd be a good idea to pick up one of those monster eggs from the trader. In the process of going to the capital though, Naofumi, he would find out that his name had actually been dragged across the mud with this new accusation. This being that he had apparently gone rogue and decided to wreak havoc on a poor village. Naofumi knew that this wasn't his doing, but he tried to admit that to anyone that, well, didn't know anybody. Honestly, it would be rather believable that he probably had some influence on the village's predicament. I mean, this is Naofumi we're talking about, a guy that can literally turn himself into a whole forest. Yeah, it would make sense some people would actually believe that Naofumi did this. And so, Naofumi, he will go get his egg from the dealer before heading to the village, annoyed. He will quickly deal with the problem by absorbing the moisture from the roots, causing the plant to dry up and die. The villagers, grateful for what Naofumi had done, would actually explain that, yeah, the spear hero attempted to help them through their famine with a super seed of sorts, and it appeared to actually be cursed. Who would have thought? Naofumi would request to see the seed before swallowing it. The people would look at Naofumi in a state of disbelief. They would continue to hold on to this state of disbelief as he planted his hands firmly onto the ground, using his fruit's abilities to, sprout fresh vegetation all around. And Naofumi, he would stay for a bit, teaching the people about how to properly care for some of the vegetation, since their methods were a bit outdated in some cases. Some of the villagers would go on to help clear the misunderstandings by traveling to the capital to explain what really happened. Naofumi would be grateful for this, and by the time they were ready to leave though, he would notice the egg actually begin to hatch, and a baby Philolio would appear. He would name this bird Philo for simplicity's sake. Yeah, hearing the name honestly made Konoe sweat drop though. For all the creativity her leader had in combat, it didn't appear to stretch to coming up with good names though. The group would continue to travel though, eventually finding themselves in another village. This one was in an even worse state though. Apparently there was a dragon corpse on top of one of the mountains there, decaying and letting off fumes that caused for a plague to be produced, which quickly spread. He would leave Konoe and Raftalia to watch over Philo while he headed up to deal with the dragon. He expected that this was going to be a simple mission of sorts, but a dragon would actually come back to life, which would honestly surprise Naofumi. He would get a sample of the corpse before purifying it and developing a cure of sorts though. He would spread the cure in the form of plants that released their own fumes, meant to make the cure airborne. The people would express their gratitude for what Naofumi had done, and he would be on his way. The cure was also capable of actually injuring and permanently killing the dragon as well. The group after that would end up encountering a girl with purple hair, and she would introduce herself by calling herself Melty. She would request something from them though, and that would be some assistance in, leading her back to her home in the capital. Naofumi would have some hesitance though with this request. He would mention that it wasn't all that safe in the capital with their current affair. You see, the kingdom in general had been corrupt the day he was summoned there. He figured that it would be safer for Melty if she just stayed in this village for now instead. Melty would contemplate it for a bit, but she would eventually agree to Naofumi's suggestion, and the group would decide to keep a low profile while there until Dead Wave actually arrived. From there, Naofumi would leave the protection of Loot Village to Raftalia and Konoe. He would decide to ride into battle on Philo, all while turning his arms into vines that could be used as whips. Multiple monsters that would actually be destroyed in one strike. Naofumi would eventually arrive to the location of the other heroes who were busy arguing with one another on where the boss was. Naofumi, he would literally just facepalm before easily finding the boss hiding underneath the ship. The monster actually turned out to be a soul eater though, and they were too much for the other heroes to handle. I'm not even gonna cap. Yeah, you see, they would quickly get overwhelmed, and Naofumi would look on in disappointment as he created a set of mushrooms that released fumes, similar to the one he used to cure the sickness of the villagers from the undead dragon. He would figure that there was a good chance the undead dragon and Soul Eater had enough parallels for it to work, and his plan, yeah, it actually did end up helping him in the end to, well, poison the Soul Eater. And also helped him confirm that the gear would potentially be what he could use to fight the boss monster as well. He would form pockets of the cure on his fine arms and then use it to strike the monster and actually injure them. The other heroes would actually be left in amazement at how much more powerful Naofumi had become than them. They weren't even able to damage it, but Naofumi though, he was handling the monster by himself. Eventually someone else would arrive though on a battlefield, and they would end up ending the boss. This would surprise Naofumi. At first he thought it was Raftalia or Kanori, but no. He would find himself to be mistaken, and instead it would be a woman in a kimono wielding two fans, and she would have been, of course, the culprit. She would go on to actually attack the four heroes, but Naofumi, he would block some of her attacks by creating a wall of vines. He would shoot a series of needles encasing a mixture of a sedative from his world and the juices from an alcoholic fruit he found out about from one of his adventures in this world. And though Glass was able to deflect the needles at first, Naofumi planned for this. While she was distracted, he would create a plant clone facing her back and use that same attack once more. This time though, it would connect, immobilizing the woman and sending her into an unconscious state before he could take the woman back to his base though. In order to actually question her, the wave would actually, well, swoop her up into one of the vortexes in the sky, and Naofumi would be left confused. Not only confused though, but he did have some sense of relief though, because, well, the wave was finally over with. That woman was strange, but at least the wave was over. He would just leave the rest of the heroes to gather their bearings as he would go back to minding his own business. The king would actually send out a command for Naofumi to meet with him though. But of course, after this point, Naofumi would have just ignored the king's command. And, well, one day, a group of knights would arrive at Loot Village. They would declare that they were looking for the missing princess Melty. This would surprise Naofumi. This girl was a princess? This whole time? Melty would make herself known here and clear everything up, or at least try to clear everything up. Well, shaming the knights for allowing themselves to be consumed in the corrupted kingdom when they were meant to express honor and dignity until the very end. The knights would try to say, oh, she was being brainwashed by the shield and that they were to dispose of him before his effects could reach any further. Melty would just try to block their path though, and as a result, yeah, the knights would try to kill her. You see this? Naofumi, witnessing what was about to happen, would immediately make himself known and restrain each and every last one of the knights. Raftalia and Kanori would have their weapons pointed up to the knights' necks as well, and Naofumi would just create a chair made from roots and vines to sit on as he began to interrogate the knights. Initially, they would refuse to answer him, but Naofumi, being a scholar, would decide to use a chemical he learned about during his research at Oxford that many refer to as the devil's breath. Yeah, though regularly used for motion sickness, when put through a chemical process, another result would end up happening. Yeah, a zombie-like state. leaving all victims in a state where they had no control over their own actions. And since the knights didn't want to cooperate with him at first, you know what Naofumi did? Yeah, he would resort to using the chemical to get the knights to spill their guts out. From the knights, Naofumi would find out that the king and mine were trying to frame him again. He'd be lying if he said he was surprised. This was not the first time they had tried doing this, trying to frame him. They already had that sort of situation with the planned catastrophe. And now they were trying to put this blame onto him as well? Funny how this world works. Honestly, enough was enough in this book, and he decided at this point he was going to pay the king a nice little visit. He would leave a planned clone in Kanoi to protect the village in Melty while he was gone. He would make his way to the capital with Philo and Raftalia, and well, people would be displeased seeing him, but he would pay them no mind. He only had business with the king after all. Guards would try to block his entrance to the castle. But you know what? Naofumi, he would just create a giant fist of thorns punching through their defenses. The three other heroes would attempt to stop Naofumi, but Raftalia was easily able to parry the attacks of Motoyasu. Out of all the heroes, after his encounter with Naofumi, he was currently the weakest. Although there was a gap in strength, Philo would actually go on to attack the sword and bow hero. Although, well, they may have had more power, physical power. Philo, she had more skill than the two of them combined. Her goal wasn't to beat them anyway. No. You see, her goal was to stall. Naofumi would make his way to the throne room, alarming the king. Naofumi gave the king a smile though, but Old Cray could practically feel the malice behind that smile of his. Old Cray would request that his guards defend him and to also find out where the other heroes were. They would immediately be immobilized by a fume Naofumi released from his body. Since it was just a room, he didn't see the point of creating a large array of mushrooms or anything. Oh no, you see, he just produced some around his back and on his arms. The fumes weren't just a paralyzing agent though. Yeah, this was a compound which allowed him to not only paralyze, but to also force all those around him to tell the truth. He would go back to find the other heroes beginning to gain an advantage over his party, but he would grab the heroes with his vines. They would struggle out of his grip at first, but go limp when they inhaled his fumes. Naofumi shot 2 needles into Philo and Raftalia as curing agents. They would be the only ones immune from the fumes though. And from there, Naofumi, he would have everyone in the same room, and he would reveal what he had done to all of them. He would ask each of them a couple of questions as well in order to prove to them that he was not bluffing. He would find out where the king kept his items for making broadcasts or well speeches to his people, and how Raftalia set it up for him. From there, Naofumi, he would interrogate the king and force him to tell nothing but the truth from start to finish. The king's name would have been ran through the mud with his confessions, and some people would still believe that Naofumi was guilty of his crimes, but they would have been outnumbered by the vast majority when realizing how everything added up a bit too well to simply be a series of lies from a king who was being held at gunpoint. Naofumi, he would attempt to dethrone the king, but find that he wasn't even the top dog in the kingdom. Oh no, you see, this was a matriarchy. There was actually a queen, and she was the one who actually ran the show. She actually called the shots here, not him. He was just holding down the fort while she was gone, meeting with the other kingdoms. He did find that she would be on her way back, though, according to one of the shadows that were directly underneath the queen. He decided to wait and meet with the queen personally. You see, it wouldn't take that long. It would have only been a few days before he finally got to meet with her and find out that she was the complete opposite of her husband and older daughter, Mine. Well, her actual name turned out to be Multi. Honestly, he was just gonna keep on referring to her as Mine though, since yeah, Multi sounded too similar to Melty. And those two are already polar opposites. Matter of fact, now that Naofumi thought about it, Multi almost tried to kill her own sister. But what was up with that? Yeah, no, he was gonna continue to call her Mine. The two of them would converse with each other and come to an agreement. You see, all Kiira and Mine, they would be stripped of their royal statuses and be treated as commoners from here on out. In the case of Mine, she also had to repay her debt after wasting their family's resources on petty issues. The Church of the Three Heroes would also be disbanded during this time, considering how well it had bias against the shield. A new religion would be incorporated instead, and this one would actually include the shield as a proper hero. A conspiring cult of what was formerly the Church of the Three Heroes would be found out as well during this time, and they would be apprehended. Without the group of followers, the Pope would be unable to further his plans and be forced to go into hiding. As part of their agreement, Naofumi would train up the rest of the heroes though, in order to prepare for the next wave. He also helped out with the training of up-and-coming soldiers in the Melvermark army. Mine was forced to continue to be part of Motayasu's party after being outed for all of her atrocities, and the fact she still needed to make up her debt. Once all of that was dealt with, Naofumi would return to Loot Village to check out if everything was still in one piece. To his delight, it was. With his new royal status, he would have more funding to be put into the outer villages and research into botany, however you pronounce it. He would create another plant clone to make sure the heroes and soldiers kept up with their training while he was busy dealing with other matters. He prioritized trying to find out more about the woman with the kimono, but kept being drawn to a dead end. What was she exactly? Another hero? He wasn't quite sure. And the queen, she didn't seem to have any information on her either. He would de-stress himself by partaking in an XP boosting event at one of the islands. Instead, he would meet a group of adventurers by the name of Loic and Therese. To his surprise, they were actually quite capable, even more capable than the heroes that he had to fight with when it came onto the waves. They would hunt monsters together and grow rapidly. Unfortunately, after a bit, it seemed as if Naofumi hit a plateau, as if he hit a cap or whatnot, to how much progress he could actually make before slowing down again. He would decide to spend the rest of his time on vacation for once though, trying the exotic fruit in this region. Fila would be taught how to swim with Kanoi one day when they suddenly went diving. They would find what looked like a countdown of sorts and quickly alerted the rest of the party. Naofumi would go to see it for himself and be shocked with how little time they actually had left. He would quickly alert the queen and gather forces in order to fend off the wave. Raftalia, Philo, and Kunoi would each support one side of the island with the rest of the heroes' parties. The four heroes would be with each other this time around, and with the training that Naofumi put them through, they were more than ready to handle this wave. They hadn't quite closed the gap between themselves and Naofumi yet, but they were able to at least become strong enough that they would not need babysitting this time around. The boss wouldn't be the biggest threat in the wave though. it would turn out to be Lark and Therese. The two of them would reveal their connection to glass, and that they came from another dimension that was being attacked by waves as well. In order to permanently end the waves, they would need to let this world die. And the only way that they could do that was by killing the four cardinal heroes. Naofumi was the biggest threat out of the four heroes according to Glass's statements. She was still recovering from the effects of Naofumi's attack, which was the only reason she wasn't here this time around. Naofumi refused to die though, and let this world rot after all he had done for them. The four heroes would actually decide to gang up on Lark and Therese, refusing to let up for even a minute. Lark and Therese would eventually be overwhelmed. An opening would be made for Naofumi to sedate the two. This time around, he made sure that they would not be able to escape like Glass was. He would get as much information out of these two as possible and decide his next course of actions, and that would be to explore some new worlds. But yeah, that's basically all I got for y'all, Titan Clan. Shout out to Neptune, who were like helping me with the first half of this or whatnot. And I am exhausted. This is basically a monthly one-time upload or so. And yeah, this is basically the end of the What If, but I do got some other plans. And yeah, as you guys already know, it is working time next signing out. You guys already know the deal. If you like the video, like. If you want to comment, leave a comment. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notification. And oh, hit that share button as well. Send it to some people that might be interested in this sort of content. But beyond that, yeah, I got nothing else to say. Peace.